So, okay, that is our presentation. Now it is time to answer your questions.
All right, so it looks like our first one, as a newly licensed contractor, is it recommended to obtain a C license first, or can I move straight into my B license if my experience is in general contracting? Well, the B license would be general building, but you can go into any classification on a license immediately, depending upon you having 4 years of experience in that classification in the past 10 years. So there's no, we don't recommend a path of which classification you go for first. That's up to you.
As a general building contractor, Class A, can I hire subcontractors to perform electrical, solar, HVAC, and civil work that have the appropriate California licenses in those areas? So with the A class, you cover a large area of what you want to hire the subcontractors for. However, if they have the appropriate license for the work that you want to not self-perform, you could hire, oh, sorry, you say Class B. Okay, so where'd the question go?
We lost
Give us just a second here.
I lost it.
Where did it go? Oh, there it goes. Go down. Sorry, Class B. Okay, so yeah, you don't have to self-perform. You can hire self-contractors if you're a licensed B and you don't want to do self-perform the work of the electrical, the solar, the HVAC. So yeah, that is a possibility for you.
And just remember, as we stated in the presentation, you are still responsible for those in the performance of that work on the project. So even though you hire or subcontract out somebody with that classification, you're still responsible for the work being performed. The free book link doesn't work. Is there a new link? Looks like they've put the link in there for you. All right. Okay, my husband has 10 years of experience working for a licensed contractor. He has an ITIN. I am looking into getting a Class B license. I have no practical experience, but I have a bachelor's degree on business. Can he be my RME? Yes, you can apply for a license and have someone else as the qualifier on that license. The qualifier just has to have the 4 years or 48 months of experience in the last 10 years. So yes, he could potentially be your qualifier for your license. Your education's not going to come into effect because you're not applying for the qualifier on the license. He's the qualifier. This a little. Did I go too far?
I think so.
Whoa. What happened? Sorry, we're having a little technical issue with the questions.
What are the application fees I need to submit with the application? What is the initial license fee and when do we pay that? So when you're applying initially, you are paying the $450 application fee that is submitted with your completed application. And that is, again, the application fee. So the initial license fee is due upon when you are approved for issuance. The initial license fee is based on the entity that you're applying for. If it's a sole ownership, it's $200. If it's any other entity, it's $350. And you will be instructed in a letter, which is a bond and fee letter that tells you, hey, go ahead and get your ILF and submit your insurance that is required for a licensee.
This is a follow-up to the previous, and what kind of certification does he need from his employer? You're going to use the certification of work experience, which is included in the application, and the employer is going to fill out his license number, name of his license, and then the dates and the type of work that was performed. So the certification is the certification of work experience, which is included in the application.
I ordered a contractor bond and LLC employee worker bond in last week of May. I haven't received the forms. When will I receive them? So as an applicant, you cannot, or as a licensee, you cannot order those blank bonds. Those are provided directly to the agents of your insurance, and they have to request those. Those get mailed out directly to them, but they are not sent to an applicant or to a licensee.
Is project management experience valid to qualify as a contractor experience? In general, no, unless you're a project manager as a supervising employee or a construction manager. Then, as stated in the program, you'll need to include on the certification of work experience how you became that manager or supervising employee. And that usually requires you stating, or your certifier stating, that you got that experience from working on certain projects or managing certain projects. In other words, how did you become a manager or a supervisor of it?
Does a LEED certification count towards experience or credit?
Would need a little more information on that, and it would depend on the classification as well.
How can I know if a person is an acceptable certifier? Well, a certifier is someone who has firsthand knowledge of the experience that they have written on the certification of work experience form. So there are several options of who can be your certifier. Again, it doesn't have to be a licensed contractor. It does not have to be the employer. Business associate is listed, fellow employee. There's a union representative. If they have firsthand knowledge of the experience, they can be your certifier. There's not somebody who we're going to say is not acceptable, because we are going to be looking at the whole picture, not just the certifier, but the experience that was listed by the certifier.
Can the business entity be changed in the future without having to apply for a new license? No. So when you change the entity of a business, you're also applying for a new license. Now, there are provisions that original license number can be reissued to the new entity. So in other words, if you had a sole owner license and you have now formed a corporation, you apply for a new license, but there are provisions that you can have that number reissued to the new business. You do need to remember that in many of those cases where a license is reissued to the new entity, a sole owner to a corp to an LLC, most of those are one-way streets. So once you transfer that license over to the new entity, it is the property of that new entity and it can't go backwards.
If the applicant is an owner's rep working for a large corporation and hired general contractors and oversaw the entire construction work, does that experience count? So you cannot supervise licensed contractors. They're licensees. They've already gone through the process, and you will not get credit for supervising licensees. If you were supervising employees of the business that you were working for, that would be different. But in general, you cannot get experience from, if it was the entire construction work and you were saying, hey, you hired contractors, I need you to go do this and do that. yeah, no credit is granted for that. Again, employees of the business only, not the licensees.
As a CEO of an out-of-state corporation, who is permitted to be the qualifier of experience? And I'm guessing an officer of the company is the question. Once again, it's the same as with anyone. An out-of-state corporation to do business in California first has to be would be a corporation in California. So you would be registered at the California Secretary of State as a registered corporation within California first. Then that corporation can apply for a license. And on that license, the qualifier can be any of the previously stated people. So one of the officers as a responsible managing officer or a responsible managing employee are both options for a corporation. LLC, you have the addition of, could also be one of the responsible managing members or managers that's listed at Secretary of State, as well as a LLC responsible officer or employee.
Do I need a B2 license to build furniture or cabinetry that mounts to a wall? So a B2 is for residential remodeling, and it has to have 3 unrelated trades. If you're building cabinetry, I would say that would probably be more in line with a C6. A classification would be required, but not the B2. The B2, again, would have to have 3 unrelated trades in your experience. So it could be cabinetry, it could be lath and plastering, and it could be landscaping, but not just to do cabinetry or build furniture. That would be a different classification.
How often is a license exam offered? We partner with PSI as our authorized testing centers. And so there are, I believe, over 20 locations throughout California, and they do testing every day. I don't believe they do it Sunday, but they do Saturday testing, and they also have evening hours available as well. But it is 6 days a week at PSI testing centers. How long do you have between application approval and when you must register for schedule the exam? So once you've sent in your application and we have considered it a complete application, we designate it as a posted application. And at that point, you will have 18 months to complete your exam process for the 2 exams or 1 exam, however many are required for you. I believe there is a 3-week wait from when your application is posted as to when you can schedule your first exam through the online scheduling through PSI. But after that, so your first exam could be as soon as 3 weeks out from when your application is posted, and then you have 18 months to complete that process.
If I have a C20 license and I want to get my C36, will I qualify for a waiver regarding work experience? Unfortunately, no, because the HVAC and the plumbing are 2 separate classifications. You would have to show 4 years full-time experience in the C36 plumbing within the last 10 years and you would be required to test for that C36. Now, since you already hold the C20, you would not have to take the law exam, but you would have to take the trade. Generally, how much credit do you get for work experience for owner-builder work when you get a permit for your work? So that's a loaded question. It's honestly dependent upon the square footage of the work that was performed that's listed on the owner-builder form, as well as the time it took you to do the work. So there is not an answer that I can give to that. It's solely based on what you put down on that paperwork for us to review.
And that form will be reviewed by an experienced deputy who will look at the square footage And the general information is they go off how much time a regular contractor would have taken to perform that work. So while you may have taken 3 years remodeling your house to put in an extra bedroom or something, they're going to go off the time allotted a regular contractor performing that work. And that may only be 6 months of credit towards that project. But that's all done on a case-by-case basis with the experienced deputy. Can you provide a link to more information on establishing an LLC versus operating a DBA as it relates to the application process? Well, the actual establishing an LLC, that is all handled by Secretary of State. Operating as a DBA can be done as a corporation or an LLC. Sometimes the DBA is just so that your name is not misleading for the registered LLC name. So as far as application requirements, if you look in the instructions for an original application, it will give you the breakdown of the entities and the various ways that you can list the business names on the application.
In addition, on the LLCs or corporation, which one would be better? You might want to consult an attorney, a construction attorney, or a CPA to see what would be monetarily more efficient for you to run your business. Just to be clear, if I have a bachelor's of science degree and a master's of business administration degree, I will only get credit for the MBA 24 months. I can't stack those 2 degrees to get a 36-month correct. That is correct. One, if you have additional, you have your BA and then you get your master's, you can only use one of those. And if you submit both of them, we're going to go with the one that will give you higher. But yes, you can only use one. You cannot stack them.
Class C20 license is the first step submitting the application, and how do I do to LLC? Is there a website for that process? So for us in licensing, yes, the first process is to submit an application. However, if you're going to do it as an LLC, you will want to form that LLC first at Secretary of State, because part of the application process is to list your Secretary of State registration number on the application. Once again, something to keep in mind, if the name of your LLC is not descriptive to the classification that you're going to, you may end up having to add a DBA as well to specify. So in other words, if you're going for the C20, you could have a LLC of ABC Landscaping LLC, but since you're going for the C20, you're going to need to add a DBA that indicates that you're an HVAC licensee.
I have a BS in finance. Will 1 year of work experience as a journeyman be sufficient, or will I need 2 years work experience? As stated in our presentation, we do not recommend putting all your eggs in one basket pertaining to your education. Again, it's going to depend on what classification that you're applying for, and what your and when we review your completed sealed transcript, whether or not how much experience we're going to be able to give you. We cannot predetermine that for you at this moment.
How often the license exam offered? So as before, it's offered every single day, but you're not going to get a link to any of that information until you have an approved posted application with us. Can you show me slide 34, please? Not sure if they can go back up to that one. The presentation is available on the website to download all of those slides so that you can review that. And also this will be archived on the YouTube channel so that you can play the entire presentation back again.
And then Thor, how often is the license exam offered? I believe Ronald did answer that earlier. It's about 6 days a week. They offer morning through evenings. We believe that they're closed on Sundays, so it is 6 days a week. And they offer more times in the day for the testers.
Are you allowed to manufacture and sell products but hire a licensed contractor to install? If part of your selling process includes the installation of a process, you're going to have to be a licensed contractor. If you're just selling a product that you manufactured, that's retail, we don't cover that. But if that product is going to be installed according to contractors' laws or classifications, the person installing that will need to be a licensed contractor, and you as an unlicensed contractor would not be able to contract that installation.
If I wanted to take over my late father's business, I assumed that I would have to go through the exact same process in order to get my license. Am I still able to keep my father's business name? So, Ruby Ann, I would ask that you send me an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov, and we'll need a little bit more information. The license number, what the business name was, information like that. So if you can include that in an email, again, to licensing@cslb.ca.gov, we'll be able to give you a little bit more of a definitive answer on that question.
I have 2 Bachelor of Arts degrees. Could I get credit for both degrees? As we stated previously, we will take the highest one, but they will only take one. They don't stack educational, so you can include both of them. They're going to look for the one that gives you the highest amount and accept that one. All right. Confirming I heard correctly, instead of having the university send the sealed envelopes of the transcripts directly to CSLB, have the applicant submit it in the sealed transcript envelope within the application so it doesn't get lost. That's exactly correct. Include your transcript with your application. Don't mail them in separately. We try to match them up, but there are instances where we are not able to match up the application with the transcript, and so they wouldn't get credit.
This might be, I think the next 2 might be duplicates. I have a BS in finance. Will 1 year journeyman be sufficient? Again, when your application comes in, we have to review what classification you've applied for, as well as review your transcripts. So we can't give a definitive answer on that. The one right after that, again, was, I don't see any information on the license exam. It's offered 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, with a plethora of hours on those days, closed on Sundays.
I currently work for a general contractor with lots of construction management experience. I'm looking to apply for a B license as a sole proprietor to have a license in my own name. However, once issued, I plan to be listed as an additional qualifier under my employer's current license. Do I need to register a business in my name? My name with Secretary of State in order to be licensed under my name and to be able to purchase a bond. So first, just getting your own license. So if you have 4 years of experience within the last 10 years in the B classification of work, which is projects concerning building of a structure, as well as 2 additional trades, you would be able to get your license as whatever you wanted, sole owner, corporation. To have a corporation, yes, you have to get it registered at the Secretary of State, and you can either get another license for your corporation and keep your sole owner, or you can transfer your sole owner to a corporation. Working as having a sole owner license and working for another person as their qualifier, you can do as a sole owner as long as you're not a responsible managing employee on the other one? If so, you would need to inactivate your sole owner license, as you could only be on one as a responsible managing employee. If you are a sole owner and you're going to be a responsible managing officer on the other license, then there are requirements to be able to qualify additional licenses, and those are in the law book and is under the qualifying of multiple licenses. On something like that, I would send in more specific information to the licensing email. Once again, licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Spell out exactly what you are attempting to do, and they can give you further clarification whether that's possible or not.
Is design work as a landscape designer at a landscape architecture firm considered valid experience for a C-27 work experience? Unfortunately, no. Hands-on. What we're looking for is somebody who was out there doing the work. If you were a foreperson, you know, how you got to that level. If you were a supervising employee, how you got to that level. But drawing up plans, designing and whatnot, that is not something that CSLB takes into consideration for work experience.
Would like to understand the PM answer a little better. If you are a project manager supervising employees, construction management type, like superintendent, project engineer on a ground up construction project, does that count as qualifying experience? Also, for coordinating over 40 trades and their foreman on site. So once again, if you are supervising employees of the company, that potentially can be experienced toward the classification that you're going for, depending upon how you came to the level of project manager, supervising manager. Supervising of subcontracted contractors does not, as those are fully qualified people that require no supervision on your part. You may be explaining them the project, but they are fully qualified and licensed people to perform that task and do not need supervision of the trade that they are performing.
My father and I are looking into obtaining a B2 license. I have a bachelor's degree in business, but I don't have the experience. My father has the necessary experience in working the trades. Would I qualify to take the exam? Unfortunately, no. In order for you to take the exam, you would have to be the one who has the work experience. And then you could also submit your degree as a potential education credit. If your father is the one who has the experience, he would be the one who would have to take the exam.
And that can be structured in multiple ways. I mean, you could still do a sole owner, that you were the owner and he was the qualifying responsible managing employee, since he has the experience. Or if you had a corporation, then you all can be officers in the corporation and he can be the responsible managing officer or a responsible managing employee again. So it's possible for you to have a business, but he, having the experience, would be the one that would be the qualifier and take the exam. What is the website to get started for the LLC? I am applying for C20. So to start for the LLC, to get an LLC started, you would be contacting the Secretary of State. That's where you would register your company as an LLC. For the application, once you have your LLC registered at Secretary of State, you would just get the original contractor's license application 1 on our website and fill that out.
Where can I get the resources to study for the exam? They were listed. There was a link that was listed in the workshop that showed the study guides and any additional resources that you could study for your exams. You can always go back to the archived YouTube, our YouTube channel, and look at this to see what that hyperlink was.
Do I need a license to build freestanding furniture such as dining room table or dresser? No, unless that furniture needs to be installed. Now, if you are installing office furniture that needs to be bolted down, cubicles, there is a classification for that. But if you're just building furniture, that's fine. Cabinetry is another thing that requires installation. So anything that would require something to be installed, repaired, that's going to require a contractor's license.
How long does it take for an application to be reviewed and then processed? So applications, when they're mailed in, they go through several different units. So it starts in the mailroom, it goes to cashiers. From cashiers, it goes to a unit called IWAS, where it's put into a imaging system. Then it gets sent over to the unit. So as a basis, I generally state about 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it can be 4 to 8, but it's also dependent on how many applications we've received at that same time. They're all processed in the order they were received. So if you were number 50 in line and we're only up to 36, it might take a little bit longer. So there is no set in concrete how long does it take, but I would allow it at least 4 to 6 weeks total processing time.
All right. I am a licensed structural engineer. Does that count for any more experience than the engineering degree I have as well? So when you say licensed structural engineer, are you saying you're licensed with the Contractors Licensing Board as a general engineer? If that's the case, then if you already hold that classification, that would be a waiver on your application. If you're talking engineer and general license, that doesn't necessarily garner credit as education credit does. That's not going to bring anything to the experience. You would probably get more credit, or you would only get credit for your engineering degree, and then whatever practical engineering experience you have for your application.
What is the address to mail the application and the check? So in the upper left-hand corner of your application, you will notice a little house that says CSLB, has a paintbrush, a saw, and our address is listed there as well as the information call center. However, our physical address is 9821 Business Park Drive in Sacramento, California, 95827. But again, it is listed on the upper left-hand corner of all applications and forms.
All right. I have no general contractor's license or experience. I'm looking to own a franchise to do the restoration due to water damage, etc. Do I need a license? If yes, what's the process? Restoration usually means actual construction. There is remediation, of which you just remove mold, things like that from water damage. But that also is a specialty classification at the board. Any type of restoration, especially if it's going to be restoration with multiple trades, drywall, wood restoration, wood stud reframing, that's all going to usually fall under the B classification. But for something like that, they will more than likely have you do what they refer to as the 4 questions, which sends in exactly what you're looking to do with the license. But all of those things, yes, require a license, and you would do it in the process of any other classification. Fill out a original contractor's license application and send that in, looking through the classifications to see what would be the classification you're going for. Once again, if you're unsure, email classifications, and that's plural, classifications@cslb.ca.gov. List exactly what you're looking to do, and they will give you a determination of what classification or classifications you would need to perform that type of work.
Check will be payable to your registrar of contractor, and what is the address? So yes, per the application, registrar of contractors is acceptable. So is CSLB or Contractor State License Board. And that address again is located in the upper left-hand corner of the application. But our physical address is 9821 Business Park Drive, Sacramento, California, 95827. It doesn't show having a master's in construction management. I also have a BS in business. I do, however, have a sufficient amount of time in the construction industry as a superintendent. So if you have sufficient amount of time, work experience, I would suggest that you use that as your work experience if that was the question. If you don't need to use the education credit, I wouldn't use it. It doesn't add any extra stars by your name. If you have the experience hands-on, again, in work experience, I wouldn't submit the transcripts and I would just go with my work experience.
And just as a clarifying point, we take up to a bachelor's of science in degrees. Anything higher is going to get the same amount. So they may not list the master's in construction management on the list, because if you have the equivalent of a bachelor of science in that, the master's is just going to not gain you more for having the master's. They will take that as the same equivalent as a Bachelor of Science in construction management. The degree of the degree doesn't add more time. So whether it's a Bachelor in construction management, a master's, or a PhD, it's all going to get the same equivalent amount in construction management. I plan to be listed as an additional officer or qualifier under my employer's current license, but want to have my own license if I ever decide to work my own business. What is the best way to do this if I don't have my own business set up yet? One, if you're planning to do it as a business, you have to have your business set up first before you submit, unless you want to do it just as a sole owner as yourself. When you say additional qualifier under someone else's, there can only be one qualifier for each classification on a license. So yes, you can be an additional qualifier for different classifications, but the best, you could either send in your question in more specific detail of what exactly you're trying to do to the licensing at cslb.ca.gov, but there are certain restrictions for you qualifying multiple licenses, and it will depend on what your license is and the license that you're qualifying and the classifications. So if you send an email in with exactly what you're trying to achieve, the classifications, who you're qualifying for, and everything, they can give you a more definitive answer to that question. Can my verifiable experience come from an inactive contractor? Yes, your experience can come, let me clarify that. You couldn't have gained your experience from an inactive contractor because he's inactive. He shouldn't be out there contracting. But an inactive contractor can be your certifier. So if he has witnessed you performing firsthand the trades, whether yourself or for another contractor, yes, that's viable experience. He doesn't have to be an active contractor to be your certifier. However, we would look for a explanation of how you gained experience from someone who was an inactive contractor that should not be contracting out there. All right.
Does the RME take the exam, and what happens if the RME ever stops working with me? Did you already answer that?
I think this may be kind of an add-on to another. So an RME, yes, any qualifier has to take the exam. So whether they're an RME, RMO, the owner of a sole owner, all qualifiers will be taking the exam unless they've passed the exam before or they already hold that classification. If the RME stops, then that license needs another qualifier. If it's a sole owner, then either the owner needs to have the experience to become the qualifier, or the owner will need to find another qualifier with the experience to be the qualifier on that license. Same with a corporation or any other. When the qualifier leaves, that license needs to replace that qualifier within 90 days, or that license will be suspended for lack of qualifier.
And then just to add on to that, if they stop and they didn't disassociate themselves and you haven't disassociated them, you do want to notify CSLB within 90 days if they stop working for you. Because again, the board needs to be notified and know that everybody is still the same on the license. So if the RME quits working for you and did not disassociate themselves, then you would have to disassociate them, and then the process can go forward with replacing the qualifier. I am self-employer. What is the requirement for the work experience? I believe you're saying you're self-employed. So dependent upon the classification that you're applying for, you might need additional information. However, 4 years full-time experience within the last 10 years with the certifier listed on your certification of work experience form. Again, dependent on what classification you're applying for, you may be required to submit additional information.
Would 1 or 2 year experience be sufficient from a local ROC program? Once again, it depends on the program. If it's high school level, it's not going to count because you're under the age of majority. So once again, as in many of these general questions, we would need to know more experience. If it's a actual college program, you would need to submit any completion certificates or degree graduation certificates to us for us to review. That would be handled on a case-by-case basis. There's no way to tell you how much experience you get from any type of program or education.
In 2015, I submitted an application. I took an exam, but I didn't pass. I missed the time to retake again. The thing is, I no longer, I guess, speak to the contractor guy who signed off my work experience. How do I have, how can I do if I have a lot of experience to apply for a general B? So if you took the exams and didn't pass in 2015, that's void because you were never licensed, so that's not going to count. However, and you don't have a relationship with whoever certified your work experience in the past. If you've continued to work from 2015 till now, you do want to have a certifier on your new application who could certify your work experience. You know, you still have to have 4 years full-time experience, and it does have to be within the last 10 years. So you could go back right now to July of 2013, but you still have to have a certifier, whether or not it's who certified you before, that doesn't matter. The certifier has to be someone who has firsthand knowledge of that experience.
And even if you don't have contact with that contractor, if you have relationships with anybody who had firsthand knowledge of the work you did back then, it doesn't have to be the contractor. It could be a fellow employee that you worked with at the time that could become your certifier. So just within the last 10 years, anybody who has firsthand knowledge of you performing the trades that they're going to list on the certification of work experience.
How self-employed can prove work experience? So again, it's dependent upon the classification. And if you worked out in the field, somebody would have to have had firsthand knowledge of your experience. So let's say you're applying for the C27 landscaping, and you did it with a business license with your city or your county. Since you didn't work for a licensee, you could have the people who you did your work for, who hired you to perform that work, certify you on your certification of work experience form. Again, 4 years full-time experience within the last 10 years, one work experience form per certifier. If additional information was needed, again, based upon the classification that you're applying for, after review of your application, then your processing technician would request additional information. At this point, before applying, we can't possibly tell you what might be needed additionally to your certification of work experience forms.
I worked for an employer for the last 13 years. He has been inactive for 2 years now. Can he be my experience and confirmation? So you've worked for him for 13 years. We're only interested in the last 10 years. If those 2 years of inactive was in the last 10 years, that still leaves you 8 years that you should have possibly been employed by him, that he had an active license and could speak to your experience. So he could still be your certifier. You just need 4 years or 48 months in the last 10 years. And they don't even have to be concurrent. If he had a license, you worked for him for 2 years, and then he went inactive for 2 years, and then he reactivated it 2 years later, and you worked for him for 2 more years, that's going to work. But the 2 years that he's inactive, they won't give you credit for work during that time working for him, as he should not have been working.
How do I get started? Well, you should have your experience first, and then you're going to complete an application, determine your business name and your entity, and send in your application fee with your completed application. And we will take it from there. Make sure that you do have a certifier, that you've completed everything that is required to be completed on the application, and that you have 4 years experience within the last 10 years in the classification that you're applying for.
Please repeat the email ID again. So I'll repeat it, and then also at the end of the presentation here in just a couple minutes, they'll also put up the screen that has the various emails, addresses, and once again, this whole presentation will be archived on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and reference that again. So for general information or specific information to your situation of maybe the type of entity or changing entities, you're going to want to send that to licensing@cslb.ca.gov. And also, if you have a question on the classification that you should be using, you're going to send a description of the trades that you intend to perform and what the job entails, as specific as possible. That's going to go to classifications, plural, classifications@cslb.ca.gov. All right. And that looks like it for today. So we will thank you for coming today.
Okay, so that's all the time we have today for our workshop. Thank you for all your questions. If you have any other questions about your application, we encourage you to drop an email to our licensing division. Here's the email address. It's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Again, that's licensing@cslb.ca.gov. If at some point you need to reschedule your exams, you can get that process started by dropping an email to exams@cslb.ca.gov. We've also put together a list of available resources for women considering a career in construction. If you haven't already, be sure to download this presentation to get them. You can download the presentation on the green banner on the top of our homepage, which is www.cslb.ca.gov. If you're watching the archive video of this workshop on our YouTube page, you'll find a link to the presentation down below.
We welcome your comments or topics for future webcasts. Just drop us an email at social@cslb.ca.gov. Special thanks to our Licensing Division and Public Affairs Office for their help on this workshop. The Get Licensed to Build workshop is a copyrighted production of the California Contractors State License Board. Thank you for watching.